Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. We're on to the next panel of the Water Week, and it's our second to last presentations of today. We have another one at 7 p.m. at the museum. So this panel is called Challenges and Collaborative Solutions, Migration, Diplomacy, and Water Management in Bilateral Relations. And moderating our panel is the Dean from the College of Engineering, Kenneth Meissner II. So I'm just going to read out here our bio from the Dean so you guys get to know him a little bit. So Dr. Ken Meissner began his tenure as Dean of the University of Texas at El Paso College of Engineering in August 3, 2022. He brought with him extensive experience from both the private sector and academia, having previously served as the founding Pro-Vice Chancellor Executive Dean of the Faculty of Science and Engineering at Swansea University in Wales. Meissner's academic journey began with a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Lehigh University in 1997, followed by a PhD in Optical Sciences from the University of Arizona Optical Sciences Center in 1994. His postdoctoral work at Sandia National Laboratories in the Surface Physics Group laid the foundations for the subsequent academic roles at Virginia Tech and Texas A&M. In 2014, he joined Swansea University as a professor and chair in the Center of Nanohealth, later transitioning to the College of Science as head of physics from 2016 to 2020. As Pro-Chancellor Executive Dean, he led the creation of an academic unit serving over 6,500 students and 300 faculty members, achieving notable improvements in student satisfaction and national rankings. Beyond academia, Meissner has collaborated in various companies to develop non-invasive glucose measurement system for diabetes patients, gaining significant experience in technology transfer between academia and industry. His research focuses on innovative optical techniques and materials for disease diagnosis, resulting in over 90 published papers and funding from prestigious organizations such as the National Institutes of Health, National Science Foundations, and the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. So thank you very much, Dean. Now the panel is all yours.
You see them start to shake when they found out they were all mine. No, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, first of all. I know it's been a long day, but this is a really interesting session. I think we've got some wonderful panelists and I think some great topics. Just kind of give you a quick overview. I'll do the bios right now and introduce our panelists. We'll then have some short context presentations. Short context presentations. And then we'll have a moderated panel discussion. And then finally, we'll make sure we leave some time for questions from the audience here. So, all right. So our first panelist is Carmen Julia Navarro, and she is online, correct? I don't know if we can pull her up online, but Dr. Navarro is a distinguished civil engineer with a master's degree in hydraulic resources engineering from the Autonomous University of Chihuahua and a PhD in materials science from the Advanced Materials Research Center. She has extensive professional experience in applied engineering, having worked across various levels of government in Mexico on water-related projects. She's also contributed significantly to academia, teaching from high school to doctoral levels, and has been involved with private consulting in civil and hydraulic engineering. Currently, she serves as the head of the Hydraulic Sectorization Department at the Junta Municipal de Agua y Saneamiento of Chihuahua. Dr. Navarro has the distinction of being the first female president of the Latin American chapter of the International Association of Hydrologists. Hydrogeologists? Let's give a round of applause for that. She also holds leadership positions in the Mexican Hydraulic Association and is a member of the advisory committee of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. Her contributions to the field have been widely recognized. She's been listed among the 50 Mexican leaders in the water sector by Líderes Mexicanos magazine for 2021 and 2022. In 2022, she was honored as the Outstanding Woman in the Hydraulic Sector in Chihuahua and as an Outstanding Woman in Engineering in Ibero-America. So, welcome, Dr. Navarro.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Dr. Rosario Sanchez. Dr. Rosario Sanchez is a senior research scientist at the Texas Water Resources Institute and an associate graduate faculty member in the Water Management and Hydrological Sciences program at Texas A&M University. Rosario, you're not here right now, but I do have my pick on, and as a former Texas A&M Aggie, I do have A&M socks on, so always dressing the part. She co-chairs the Transboundary Aquifers Commission of the International Association of Hydrogeologists and founded the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. As the principal investigator of the Transboundary Aquifer Assessment Act program, or TAP, for Texas, she also leads the Transboundary Groundwater Research Team and established the Transboundary Water Portal. In 2021, Dr. Sanchez published the first complete map of transboundary aquifers between Mexico and the United States and introduced the term transboundarianess to describe the strategic value of aquifers located at international borders. With 25 years of experience in academia and the public sector, she has extensively worked on transboundary issues between Mexico and the United States. Dr. Sanchez serves as an associate editor for the Journal of the American Water Resources Association, the Journal of Environmental Management, and the Texas Water Journal. She has participated in international panels and committees at UNESCO, the International Groundwater Resources Assessment Center, and the International Water Resources Association. She holds a bachelor's degree in international relations from Monterey Tech, a master's degree in diplomacy from the Institute of Diplomatic Studies, Matias Romero, and a PhD in water management and hydrological sciences from Texas A&M University. Welcome, Dr. Sanchez.
Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Alfredo Granados. Dr. Granados holds a PhD in agronomy with a focus on hydropedology from teaching an engineer new words today from New Mexico State University, just up the interstate there. We won't hold that against you. A master's degree in groundwater hydrology from the University of Ciudad Juarez, and a bachelor's degree in agronomy from ESAHE in 1984. Since 1987, he has been a professor of groundwater hydrology and soil sciences at the Autonomous University of Ciudad Juarez. He has been recognized as a National Researcher Level 2 by the National System of Researchers at CONICET since 2006, a status valid until 2030. These get nice and long. In 2024, in 2024, he was honored with the Enzo Levy National Hydraulics Award by the Mexican Hydraulics Association. Dr. Granados currently serves as the head of the Artificial Intelligence for Agriculture area of the Board of Directors at the AI Center of the Chihuahua State Government. He has received multiple prestigious awards, including 2016 recognition of academic merit from the National Association of Schools and Faculties of Engineering of Mexico, and in 2013 the State Award in Science, Technology, Innovation from the government of the state of Chihuahua. He's also the vice president of the AMH Chihuahua section for the 2024-25 term. Welcome, Dr. Granados. Next we have Dr. Alex Mayer. Dr. Mayer is a professor of civil engineering here at UTEP. He has teaching and research are dedicated to addressing water resource challenges through collaborative modeling of watersheds and groundwater aquifers, as well as engaging stakeholders. Dr. Mayer's current research encompasses a wide range of topics, including water resource systems modeling, transboundary aquifer governance, impacts of the sea level rise on coastal groundwater aquifers, water access in underserved populations, climate change impacts in urban water availability, tree benefits and water use trade-offs in desert cities. His research spans diverse regions such as the Rio Grande Basin, the Caribbean, the Laurentian Great Lakes, and the areas of Sonora and Veracruz in Mexico. Welcome, Dr. Mayer. And finally, last but not least, certainly, we have Ms. Sarah Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez is the Senior Coordinator for the UT System LSAMP Research Center housed in the College of Engineering at UTEP. The LSAMP program is funded by the National Science Foundation to assist universities and colleges in their efforts at increasing the number of students completing high-quality degree programs in STEM disciplines. Her collaborative and published research is focused on holistic mentoring, mentoring culture, peer-led learning environments, undergraduate research experiences, synergistic models, and community college faculty development. In addition to 17 years of service at UTEP, Ms. Rodriguez has had technical and teaching positions at El Paso Community College and Tech Miliano ITESM, respectively. She received 2 Bachelor's of Arts degrees and an MA from the University of Texas, El Paso, and is currently a doctoral student in the Teaching, Learning, and Culture program. Welcome, Ms. Rodriguez. All right, I told you it was a great panel. So we're gonna let them kick it off here with some short context presentations, starting with Ms. Sanchez. Or no, I'm sorry, Rosario Sanchez, Dr. Sanchez.
Should I just go ahead?
You got it.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. It was long. I feel very old now. So thank you for the invitation to UTEP, all the people that put this together. I'm very excited to be here. And I can't say more thank you because we only have 5 minutes to present. So I'm going to go quickly, trying to summarize why science diplomacy has some relevance when we talk about transboundary waters, in particular between US and Mexico. So why? Well, we are in urgent need for interdisciplinarity, because science is not enough, because hard skills are not enough these days on the current challenges. We need also soft skills development, and because as we get more and more challenged by current conditions, we need more of these profiles. Next, please. So, okay. So why? And just to give a brief context on the current conditions, and this is just a very slim photograph. We know that the population of many border cities will double in 30 years, especially between Texas and Mexico. We know that if the border region between US and Mexico were a single country, it will be among the 5th or the 4th largest economies in the world. It's not just any region of the world. It is projected that municipal use will increase by 100%. And 40% for industry in the next 50 years. I suspect that will be less than 50 years. Climate projections suggest more variability on precipitation for both our international basins, which means we cannot rely on the weather or precipitation anymore for planning purposes. And we also know that both of our international basins are overallocated and are amongst the most water-stressed basins in the world. So that's the big context. Next, please. So we know that we're living a paradigm shift or a paradigm crisis, in which the crisis is really availability of fresh water and food, and how groundwater use in the border or between the two countries is on the rise, and how within this context, the production of science, even the knowledge of science, even the distribution and dissemination of science itself is not enough. Next, please. So given the new conditions, we also need new profiles. And this is what science diplomacy is all about. It's a form of new diplomacy that describes formal and informal, technical, research-based academic within the research of international relations. It's growing fast because we need it fast, because the current challenges need fast responses as well. It's practice dedicated to better understanding and reinforcing the connections between science, technology, and international affairs, which are governed by social sciences. And more at national level, but even more important at global scale or regional scale in this case. Next, please. So what is irrelevance? Because environmental challenges do not respect boundaries. And when it comes to water, is even worse. So the jurisdictional boundaries are being challenged by the new environmental conditions and the new governance structures, actually, at these regional and global scales schemes. And international organizations are getting much more important in terms of addressing global scientific problems because it affects us all equal. So the improvement of climate and water scarcity in partnership of these international organizations on a regional scale, even more than on a national scale, becomes more and more important. Next, please. So the new roles that we need right now, the new profiles that we need to work on right now is those diplomats have to understand science and speak on its behalf, and scientists ourselves have to learn to communicate to different audiences. Persuading becomes sort of diplomats. This is a hard bone to digest, especially because we as academics, as scientists, are very used to speak in our own language that only scientists can understand. So this is a big paradigm shift as well. It's not just the way we deal with the current challenges, but it's the way we communicate science under current conditions. Next, please. And the recipe, well, there's no recipe for that, really. There's no straightforward answers. There are no protocols, there are no methods. There are processes, there are time scales that we need to work on, there are scopes of work, but most of all, there are principles. And this, for me, or from my perspective and experience, those are the principles that we need to start working on to make our science more effective and more communicative. Next, please. Of course, every decision at any level and scale, at least at binational relationships, will have an impact on the other side. So the magnitude of that impact should be evaluated. That's the shared vision that we need to start working on. The commitment, of course, respect of the agreements, of the objectives, of the priorities, shared priorities, of the issues and to your own words and actions, and the commitment to a shared long-term solution. The third and most important one, and we've seen these more and more common, I guess, lately between US and Mexico, is trust. How to build trust between stakeholders. And trust really has become very undervalued, but it is still the strongest link among humans. And therefore, institutions and sharing parties within and across countries. However, it is also the most vulnerable link to break. So it's most important and the most vulnerable. So it's hardly amended, non-recyclable. If you lose it, it is gone and it's going to cost us more to build up again. Next, please. The other principles. Oh, can you go back one, please? Next one. No, we're showing one. But anyway, the other one, and I have it here. The other one is inclusion. Of course, respect of differences. Water is a natural suppressor of differences, so we need to learn from it. And the last one is the communication, but not just to communicate, is communicate effectively. And in this world of mass communication, miscommunication, information technologies, speed, social media, all that, including transboundary relationships, remain very valid and even become stronger, but at the same time, harder to gain and maintain. So it's important for us to know our neighbors at this point, to respect our differences, to commit to our neighbors, and we all have to give up so we all can win. And with that, I'm going to finish my presentation. Thank you very much. I hope I made the 5 minutes.
Thank you, Rosario, for those a good overview of just how complex and broad this issue is. Next, Sarah.
All right, so that's better. No, I think that's better. Oh, okay, for online. Okay, so wants me to start singing. Hi, everybody. Thank you for your time being here. For me, it is an honor, and I'm humbled to be surrounded by experts because in no way am I an expert on these topics. I am giving this presentation as part of an informational effort, and this extends from, if you were here, I see some familiar faces, but if you were here in the morning for the opening remarks and you heard the principal engineer from the IBWC or the commissioner from the SILA, from the Mexican section, you will be familiar with some of these concepts. The SILA is near and dear to my heart for many reasons, and that is why I chose to give this presentation, which is called a Testament of Friendship and Bilateral Collaboration. Basically, full disclaimer, this is informational. I am in no way affiliated with the SILA IBWC. I did request permission to give this presentation, and it is dedicated to my mother, who worked there for 30 years plus and is sitting in the front row. So the, thank you. The historical background, I feel this was one of the doors to science and engineering for me because I grew up there. My mom started working there when I was 4. So I started learning about these things. And I think that as an educator at heart, once we have good information, it is our duty to pass it on. And I feel that this is an organization that has that shows an example of great collaboration that is not widely known and should be supported even further, right? So if we can advance to the next slide, there's a lot of information on the slides. And by the way, feel free to interrupt me si tienen preguntas en inglés o en español, anything goes, so raise your hand. The historical background, as you may know, is that when the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed back in 1848, Mexico, we unfortunately say lost, but we changed our border lines dramatically based on that treaty, right? And then the Gadsden Treaty of 1853 created some other distinctions on the border. So based on this, there was a need to address the situation of who was controlling the line, specifically because of the change of the river bed. And in 1889, the commission was first assembled. And it had a different name, as you can see on the slide. It was the International Boundary Commission, IBC. We were missing the W, the water component. So this was just to demarcate or delimitate the new border based on political turmoil and all of that, the situation. If we can go to the next slide. So there were a series of treaties and conventions. As you can see the dates, they started, like I mentioned, in 1848. We have 1853, 1882, 1884, and finally 1889, which is a century and some ago, where this was founded as an organism addressing these issues. Next slide, please. Then the treaties and conventions continued, and all of them, as you see, are around the resolution of boundary and limits, right? With the most recent one, the Convention of 1906. Next slide, please. So that's a lot. So in order for us to visualize or have at a glance slide of how this looks in time, we have 3 key moments, as you can see in lighter blue, right? 1848, the temporary joint commission. Then we have 1889, the officialization of this as a bilateral organism. And then in 1944, it took its final form, which is its actual name and function, and added the water component, giving attention to all border sanitation problems that expanded to limitational or territorial issues. Next slide, please. So the commission, what is the commission? The IBWC or SILA in Mexico has a task to apply the rights and obligations. That's really big right there. The rights and obligations which both governments assume under all of the treaties that I showed you in the previous slides. And what is the aim? Well, the aim is basically benefiting the social and economic welfare of the peoples of both sides. And this is, even though the foundation is derived from a political issue, from a war, the current commission has no political affiliations. Therefore, it is tremendously important that its effort is not politicized at all. So this is an international body, and it's composed and administered independently, where the principal engineer and commissioner are appointed by their respective presidents. So this is a very important task as our commissioner earlier in the morning addressed that. So the U.S. section is led or operated by the Department of State, and on the Mexican side, we have the Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores in charge. Next slide, please. So I like to see this map. I wanted to show this map because you can see the reach of the commission. You can see how these are tandems or pairs of offices that operate, not all of them, because for example, Las Cruces is not on the border, but it still touches certain areas that are important to have a landmark or to have a representation. So all of these are either administrative offices or central offices or field offices. We have 9 on the Mexican side, as you can see on the map, and there are 11 on the US side. Next slide, please. So that's the overview of the territorial, like where the offices are. Now, the jurisdiction or what the commission has in terms of its agreements and coordination centers around 6 main areas, as you can see. So territorial boundaries, which was the historical, I guess, origin of the office, and then also surface and ground waters, which is one of the main topics of this conference, right? As well as international crossing projects, sanitation projects, and water qualities. So both sections of the SILA IBWC have dedicated teams and projects that address these specific central areas of jurisdiction. Next slide, please. The rights and obligations are as follows. So I bolded some of the main concepts so you can see again the reach of the duties and the scope and the main goal, right? Distributing the waters of the 2 rivers that are related to the border, regulating and applying conservational efforts, which is also something that is not only costly, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of resources. Operation and maintenance of storage dams. I think this is one of the biggest ones as well, because these are plants that generate energy and that we sometimes don't even know they exist and power our regions. The regulation of the water allocation, protection of the land, overview of flood zones, the solution of border sanitation's another huge one, and obviously as its original task was demarcation of the land boundary. So if you can go to the next slide, those are the main duties, but other duties, I think we were missing some slides, but I still have a couple of minutes. So if not, I have a copy here. But some other duties are kind of open recommendations that the commissioners on both sides can make based on their efforts in common or their needs in common. And once a project is approved by both sides, there is also an agreement and a back and forth agreement on how this is going to be funded and maintained. So some of the main projects to date that are important for the IBWC and were also mentioned by the principal engineer were the water quality, sanitation, groundwaters and surfaces, like monitoring of the drain, monitoring and analysis of the water quality, controlling the water weeds across international waters, monitoring the Pacific coast, the wastewater treatment plants, studies among the aquifers and monitoring of the aquifers that provide us with water in this region as well, and some administration of the surface waters based on the treaties that are currently active. So also one of the projects that is rarely known, I guess, for the general public is how the commission is tasked with the maintenance of what we called the locals, the free bridge, right? So BODA. That is also very important for the health of our community, of our binational community. And as you heard in the morning, if you were here again, more than 300 international documents and agreements have been signed and filed and continue to provide control of the water, maintenance of our resources, and peace across the nations, because this is indeed our most valued resource. So for the last 136 years, the IBWC has safeguarded the rights and obligations of both governments under boundary and water treaties and agreements, and it continues to play a pivotal role in the communication and execution of these agreements for the indiscriminate benefit of the people of both sides. So therefore, the IBWC is a beacon of diplomacy, friendship, and collaboration between both countries. So I was missing my reference slide, so it's all of the web pages where I gather this information, and I would like to give an acknowledgement to Ms. Sonia Gonzalez, the Administrative Director of the Mexican section, for her clearance to this presentation, and also the Secretary of DACILA, who is present here in case I get tricky questions that I'm unable to answer. So I'm very lucky to have that padding, and thank you so much. That's my time.
Thanks, Sarah. That was a great history and scope of the commission. That was wonderful. So next, Carmen, I think you're online and looks like you're all booted up here.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much to UTEP for the invitation and introduction for me. I'm going to talk general framework and current challenges. Today, I want to share some ideas about three important topics: migration, diplomacy, and water management, especially in the relationship between Mexico and United States. Next, please. Water has no borders, but its challenges do. In border region, water management is often difficult because countries have different ideas about water rules and how to do shared. They also have different priorities about water rights and how to manage it. Infrastructure is often not enough for people who move from place to place. In addition, international agreements are usually not strong enough to help during humanitarian crises. Please, next slide. The climate change make water problems worse and grows faster in high migration areas. These changes make water problems worse. They cause long and strong drought, rivers and lakes to dry up, and people to use more groundwater. Extreme events are forcing people to leave their homes and are causing new migration. This increases social and political problems over water in dry areas. Also, economic problems are increasing and work is going down, making it harder to find good jobs. Next, please. The discussion in working together is key to taking care of water in a good way. A good way is people want to help and use fair and clear rules. With this, I trust it's easier to make good agreements and share decisions. Investments in shared infrastructure and technology transfer, but above all, capacity building for people on both sides. The basis of understanding must always have human rights as a fundamental component. In conclusion, water and immigration and working together between countries are all connected. That's why we need to find solutions together. Cooperation between countries is not just a good idea, it's necessary to face the growing problem in the environment, society, and people live. To solve a hard problem, we need money, knowledge, information, technology, and trained people. But the most important thing, and without it, everything gets harder, is the real will of each person and group to help from where they are. Y lo diré en español. Frente a un problema tan complejo, lo más importante es no solamente que falta inversión o dinero, conocimiento, datos, tecnología y personal capacitado, tanto fuera como dentro de las instituciones. Pero lo más importante y lo que puede ser que sea real, esta solución o este abordaje de este problema complejo, es sin duda cuando todos los personas y los actores suman en su ámbito de acción. Si no, va a fallar cualquier propuesta que se haga. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Gracias, Carmen, for helping establish the framework for today's discussion. Next, Alfredo.
Yeah, thank you. Well, they sent us a couple of challenge questions to select among all the complex topics on this issue on water. So I selected the role of academia and research institutions just to be according with what they requested. Although there's a big span on things that you have to discuss in order to bring in the academia into the challenge questions. And we already heard in the morning the presenters and the design table, the difficult perspective that we have in the future for our border region. So next slide, please. So I did pinpoint a couple of issues in there for our binational water resources and transboundary aquifers in specific. So I always talk about the black mark syndrome, which means that Mexican side doesn't have anything on the U.S. side in regards to natural resources, and Mexican side doesn't have anything on the U.S. side. So we do have a lot of information. We have a lot of web pages. We have a lot of data, but there's no one taking the task on bringing it together, like units, for example, like definitions, like geographic extension and scale and stuff like that. So we have a huge agenda for the future within our universities. So I know that Alex is leading the hydro diplomacy work, and hopefully I will be joining this summer some of his students also from UACH, and we will bring some students from the UACJ. So we have hydro diplomacy, and we will talk about the natural resource in regards to water when we are going to be doing this in summer. But we already heard on Sarah's presentation about the treaty, the minutes, the users, and we have Gilbert in here checking if we are making mistakes. Thank you, Gilbert. And he's always looking, and he has always been the balance in between discussions from both sides of the border. So the minutes and the treaties and all the stuff that we have for speaking in between our both sides is also a big challenge, because that thing is always changing, mostly because of the impacts on climate change that we have and the scarcity and drought that we have. So climate change and drought is also a big issue right now. I was discussing during this week with my colleague Tom Gill from Geology Department here in UTEP and with Sam Ferdinand from the Water Resources Research Institute about where that dust comes from. Those 2 weeks behind us were really complex. So we were discussing about who who should we blame? I mean, is it only the Mexican agriculture people? Is drought, or is it also the U.S. agriculture areas? So I will show you a map that Tom sent us so we can understand that. That term in there, REPTA, it's in Spanish for Registro de Derechos de Agua in Mexico. And that's the concessions. I'm not sure if that's the right word in English. That's the water permits that we have for industry, for agriculture, for domestic uses. But that specific data that they have in there is only for information, what I call in water, paper water. That is a volume of water that you're entitled to have per year, but nobody's measuring that. So you can pump as much as you want, or even you can pump less water. And that's a big issue because groundwater is getting depleted. So that's a big issue on the Mexican side. And then we were looking for information on the US side. And other than what Scott and Manny Herrera from Paso Water Utilities and the Junta Municipal, they are exchanging data. Other than that, there's difficulty to see, like, for example, the Office of State Engineer information. You don't have the water well depths and lithology and stuff like that. You have a point in there, and you have the user probably, but you don't have the story on what's going on in there. So issues like that is something that we need to discuss. So I want to jump all the way to the things that we've been able to accomplish. Yeah, just, you can leave that one. Next slide, please. So stuff like this in here, you can see the contour lines in there, and the water depletions in the Conejos Medianos, Mimbres aquifer system, and the slight line in the top, you can see U.S.-Mexican side. So who's measuring this? I mean, I know that the U.S. is measuring. I know that Junta wasn't measuring, but who's bringing it together? That's what I meant with the black mat syndrome. That we need to bring data up, update data, and do it real-time data. We have the technology in there. We have digital piezometers, but who has the servers working with that information? And even though if we had the data, who is manipulating the data or not manipulating? Who is using the data to show you what's going on with the system in real time? Because we have that technology. It could have been as easy as a web page with real-time monitoring system. And a couple of months ago, Isaac joined us with the New Mexico Water Resources Research Institute. And we went to the Junta de Aguas, and they showed us all these nice system and real-time monitoring that they have from the aquifer systems on both in Conejos and in the Hueco Bolson. But that data is sitting in there. But the human resources are not there. They're just so pressured to bring water to the cities that nobody's analyzing the data. But it's a huge amount of data. So we are working on that. Next slide, and we'll be finishing pretty soon. Successful stories in here. And again, Alex worked with this project as well as Dr. G. I think they're going to overthrow him because I'm going to be speaking more, I think. So this project in here, I mean, you can see the box that we spend in there. Who's going to be spending that money? Who's going to bring that amount of money in the Mexican side? I know that we don't have that money. And this is only a small area in here between Elephant Butte all the way to Fort Whitman that we were studying based on how much water was going to be available for agriculture based on climate change. And we did a nice model in there then. And I bet that Alex is going to be speaking a little bit on that because I saw his slides. So yeah, I mean, we work together in the academia. We can do that. But it takes money, it takes time, it takes resources and human resources. But that's the bottom line. That's the basics that we need to bring into the system. Final slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So the slide on the left is what we call Lake Cabeza de Vaca. And that's an old paleo lake system that we used to have filled in there about 15, 20,000 years ago in that area. There's a huge area. It's more than 3,000 square kilometers. Goes all the way from Silver City all the way to Villamada in Mexico. And that used to be filled in there. And I know that the farmers in Samalayuca were really happy with the dust storms because the sands in the Samalayuca dunes, they were filled up again. I mean, we had big discussions on how much sand we can sell from that area. You can replenish that every year, 10 times probably more. And you can see on the right side, that's the image that Tom shared with us. And the green area, that's the dust storm that came out from some are ag fields in the Mexican side. But you can see also it's really intense in the US side in New Mexico. And there were really nasty, bad accidents in the highways. And then you can bring in the health issue in there. And there's a huge bunch of things that you can have. So that's because groundwater was deteriorated in the Mexican side. And some ag fields were abandoned. And they were not replenished with vegetation on tree borders or management of soils and stuff like that. They can be easily done. So it's going to be who's going to be bringing the money to accomplish that to help the binational region. Thanks. I'm sorry to spend more time.
No, thank you, Alfredo. Thanks for setting the stage for how the academics can have impact in this area, particularly around the data fusion and actionable decision analysis. So last but not least, we have Alex Mayer.
Again. And thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel and for hearing from all of the experts beforehand and a really nice history of CELA and IBWC. So the topic I wanted to say something about is how cycles of climate and cycles of water diplomacy don't always line up. And I wanted to reference a couple of different places in the Rio Grande watershed. First, the circle in the upper left encompasses our area here, of course, and the Elephant Butte Reservoir. And then the larger circle encompasses the Rio Conchos and Amistad Reservoir. And those two places are affected already by climate change, maybe for different hydrologic reasons. The upper circle there, our area is mostly affected, climate change is mostly affected through changes in snowpack in the southern Colorado, northern New Mexico area, where it is in the Rio Conchos and further down into the Rio Grande Valley and the Valle de Bravo. There, the climate is mostly affected by monsoons and tropical storms. And so each of the snow-fed and monsoons and tropical storms, different kinds of climate effects. And then the plot there, that's from an article by Renteria Villalobos and Randy Hansen and others. And what that plot is showing is a very fancy title here, Cumulative Departure from the Casas Grandes Tree Ring Indices. So you may know that the width of tree rings from year to year is an indication of how dry or wet things are in the climate. And so this is sort of a proxy for how dry or wet things have been for the last about 1,300 years or so. And this is a tree ring record that is most relevant to the Rio Conchos Basin. And what the zero there is the average of about the last 300 years or so. And you can see close to the present, there's this marking there, the mega drought that we're currently in, which is maybe the largest mega drought for quite a long time. But you can see that according to these tree ring records, things have also gotten quite bad in the past. And whether that will happen in the future or not is of course, another question. So you're seeing some big cycles here. And then, of course, if we could look even closer, we'd start to see cycles like La Nina and El Nino and so forth that affect water availability here. And so before I get to the next slide, I guess the point of this slide is that the new normal is that there is no normal. And that perhaps there never was any normal. And so if we look at how water is managed between the two countries, there are also cycles in that too. For example, in the Rio Conchos, there's the sort of famous, if you're a water nerd like me, 5-year cycle for Mexico paying its so-called water debt to the United States. And so does that 5-year cycle match up with the cycles that we see occurring now and into the future? And one thing that I think was very well noted by your talk is that the government agencies, CELA and IBWC, they have flexibility built in, but whether whether we can all handle this kind of flexibility or not remains to be seen. And the next slide, please. So this is some work we did on looking at projections of water availability in Elephant Butte Reservoir. And again, this is mostly affected by, in terms of climate change projections, by changes in snowpack. And so what we see in each of these two plots is the we see the averages over the last 50 years or so on one side, and then averages over the next 50 projections of what will happen over the next 50 years or so. And then if we look at the plot on the left, the colors have to do with severity of expected droughts ranging from medium severe to very severe. And then each of the dots represents a different model run. So we don't really know what's going to happen in the future. And so we have to use many, many different model projections to find out what might be the span of what will occur in the future. And so the plot on the left then, if we just focus on the severe droughts, you see for 1971 to 2020, all the dots are somewhat closely clustered together, but showing that roughly speaking, about 10% of the time, we've seen a severe drought in the last 50 years. But then if we go to 2021, 2070, not only does the median, the mean or the median change, but we also may be exposed to some extremely serious droughts. So it's possible that half of the next 50 years will have severe droughts, much like we've been experiencing for the last 20 or 23 years. And then the plot on the right is about the number of consecutive years corresponding to a drought severity. So again, looking at the green dots there, we see that the severe drought, then about the average length or number of consecutive years of severe droughts is maybe 3 or 4 years. We go off into the next 50 years, and we see again that the possibility of having a very long-term drought starts to increase. So there is the potential of seeing what we're seeing now, again, repeating itself into the future. And so again, what did all these different cycles and lengths and so forth have to do with water diplomacy? I think it's going to mean that both countries are going to have to be very flexible when it comes to figuring out who gets what water when in order to respond to this. And then this has all been about surface water, Rio Grande, Rio Bravo water. But I think it's already been mentioned today that when we see droughts with the surface water, then that makes us rely more on groundwater and deplete the groundwater even further. So I'm not here to be pessimistic, but then groundwater sharing, of course, is between the two countries is just beginning, and an area of focus that I think we'll deal with as we have more and more surface water droughts.
Thank you, Alex. You're not a pessimist, but you're a data driven. So we'll now move on to some moderated questions. We'll go for about 25 minutes, and then I'll open it up for questions from everybody. So Rosario, I think we're going to have the first question for you. What role can universities and research centers play in shaping water policies? Oh, Rosario had to step out. Nope, looks like she's out. Okay, so we'll start with Carmen then. So we'll start with online still. What are the main challenges in water management in transboundary regions, especially in migration contexts?
Ok, Carmen nos escucha, entonces nomás para traducir la pregunta, ¿cuáles son los principales retos en el manejo de agua en las regiones fronterizas, sobre todo en el contexto de migración?
Bueno, lo voy a decir rápido en español para que no tardarme tanto, pero creo que los principales retos es básicamente que no hay reglas claras y no hay una infraestructura que pueda soportar esta gran movilidad de gente, como lo expliqué en mi presentación inicial. ¿Sí? Entonces, el gran reto es no solo infraestructura, dinero y desarrollo de capacidades. Vuelvo a repetir, ese es el gran reto. Y lo voy a decir en inglés para que quede un poco más. The great challenge is money, knowledge, information, technology, and train people. But principal challenge is the person that action acción en your comunidad, en su comunidad, ¿sí? O sea, lo más importante es cómo las personas en su comunidad están participando y están resolviendo esta complejidad.
Yes, Carmen. Next, any follow-ups on that? Anybody? No. Okay. Next question, Alfredo. Let's go to you. How can academics collaborate with governments and water operators to implement sustainable strategies and tactics, even?
Yeah, yeah, definitely we can do a lot with agencies like SILA, Junta de Aguas, and all these water administrators. As long as we can build the trust, I think that Rosario was talking about trust in between agencies and in between academia. If the universities are willing, are capable of showing the agencies that we are doing good research, research that is based on data and on models and stuff like that that we are producing, the link in between universities and institutions will be easy if they give us their trust and share the data, because they have a lot of data in there, as I mentioned before. And for example, we are expecting in the near future, based on these heat waves and all these flash heat waves and all this climate change, we have a lot of migration processes from ag fields to the cities in Mexico. And some of the farmers have both nationalities, U.S. and Mexican nationalities, and when they run out of water, they just jump the border and they abandon their fields. So who's going to be managing that? Who's going to be studying those issues? We have a lot of research going on right now on the Mexican side in regards to those different social, economic, and environmental issues in regards to water. So the universities can really easily link because we have new technology, and sometimes even the agencies don't have the tools that we have at the university. And that has been changing a lot in the Mexican side. And I know the US side has a lot of tools and things to share with the agencies. And when you bring it, I mean, we need to solve the first on each side, and then you have to bring it on the binational approach. And then we can see what's going on in between everyone else. So trust is the basic line, information is the second, and again, I insist in funding.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up on that. I think you're absolutely right. You're solving two separate problems and then you're trying to bring the problem together, and funding is an issue. NSF, Connie said, like to fund their own sides, right? And so, do you see a coming together of the funding where you're seeing cross-border funding governmentally as opposed to the Mexican government funding the Mexican side and the U.S. government funding the U.S. side?
Yeah, that's a really interesting follow-up on the question, because now that we have new government in the Mexican side and we have this scientist as president, she's really into doing all this work on the academia to identify different problems. And as for example, we have the Programas Nacionales, and that's the main issues. There are 11 main issues in there, like health, like environment, like stuff like that. And number one is water for the federal government. So hopefully the agencies like SILA will have the funding to bring the resources. And then in the US side, we have been working with TAP, for example, and we have been working with UTEP in the other project that just finished a couple of years ago. So the universities have funding, and they need to look for more funding, but it's more difficult now on both sides of the border. But we can make it to work together if we focus on pinpoint areas like these aquifers, exchanging aquifers information in both sides of the border, I think.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And hopefully we can help drive that international collaboration. Alex, the next question I think follows right on for you. And that's what strategies can be implemented to manage the transboundary water resources effectively?
Yes. Well, I think first of all, we have to find opportunities to conserve on both sides of the border. Um, in From what I've seen, sometimes Mexico is the leader for irrigation conservation, and we heard earlier today that, for example, easy for me to say, transition to drip irrigation can save as much as 50% of irrigation water. Again, easy for me to say. I'm not the farmer who has to install it and keep it up. But yeah, I think that that's one issue where we need to be looking towards working together. I also mentioned already, I think a binational groundwater management. There are already some issues that come up with regard to specific aquifers. We saw Dr. Sanchez's very amazing aquifer mapping operation. But again, I think there's going to be more and more pressure on groundwater resources on both sides of the border. And we need to maybe anticipate that rather than just react to it as it comes up. And then water quality, I think that we've been talking mostly about water quantity. There are water quality issues that I think we also require working on, including wastewater, making sure that on both sides of the border, the facilities are working correctly, not only funded correctly in the first place to build them, but then also to maintain them. And then I also wanted to mention about academic cooperation and funding. Of course, that's what the first word that comes out of an academic's mouth. But we do have some amazing organizations that we heard about earlier, and those two organizations are, at least in my opinion, severely underfunded. Is that okay to say?
Find out.
Yes. Yes. Is it okay to say in front of these folks here? I think they might agree with me, and at least in private. And that's another thing I think that needs to happen is IBWC and CELA need more attention from their governments.
Thanks, Alex. Quick follow-up on that. So that's talking about the strategies. But as academics at universities, we do a lot of technology development as well. How do you see the technology development playing with the strategies?
You know what? I think I'm going to pass that to this guy right here. Sorry.
Oh, you're getting the next one.
Yeah, the application of technology within agencies is also something that needs to be taken care of. As Alex mentioned, I mean, CELA and IBWC are really excellent diplomatic agencies, but they don't have tools to monitor or model stuff like that. They need to bring out data and to bring out equipment to keep monitoring the systems in real time. And universities do have that resource. And sometimes with funding from different agencies, both Mexican agencies and US agencies, like I said earlier, CONACYT is putting a lot of resources. And these 11 issues like water, number one, was really exciting for us because the National Plan of Water Resources, the hydraulic plan in Mexico, takes investment, huge amount of money investing, like 16 or 17 big projects in Mexico in regards to water. Unfortunately, there are a lot of problems with water, but it's a good start for Mexico to have this funding. And I don't remember the number, it's a huge amount of millions of pesos that we didn't have before to bring out the resources, economic resources to solve the demands of water, both agriculture and domestic uses. And in regards to technology, we are barely at the age of the technology. We have explored some issues and some the things that we heard in the morning on the technology and the monitoring, the real-time information that we are gathering from the field to make this decision on real time to send the farmers to turn off the well or turn on the well. This is FarmBeats. You pretty much you heard about that from Microsoft. That Microsoft was investing a lot of money on how to manage the resources to produce the food and save the water with their technology. And I need to be clear with this. It's not an easy process for the farmer to trust a signal from somewhere in which it says, turn off the well. And when they were used to fill all the water, the pecan fields, and they want to see the water just draining all the way. When you see the moisture is, I mean, you're stressing the plant in there. And to see a dry field and say this field capacity for the plant in there, and they don't see the water in the soil, they don't trust that. So it's a curve that time will solve. And unfortunately, the reality, which is scarcity of water, is the thing that will solve the problem. Because the farmers that don't, if you don't use the technology, you will get out of the business in agriculture area. So you need technology, you need to teach them how to use it and how to trust it.
I have a quick follow-up for the two last questions regarding academia involved in these efforts. I think that I'm probably answering or preaching to the choir, but as part of my current position, running a research center, it is so obvious that we are connected. So we speak about the need to connect and be aware, and I think we already have that, and we're past those steps because it's water. It's like, come on, it's a no-brainer, right? We would think. However, I think that the smart connection is what has to happen in order to make that awareness work, because in my position, we have undergraduate students who are being pushed into research opportunities. And I say push because sometimes they're not even aware of the existence of problems or projects such as. But when we do that, they become links to industry, for example, or to another. Here in the border, we have that privilege of having another country, another city, another state, right, as neighbors. So having those connections and stressing a not only a public service, but a need for social well-being. I think that's key for all of our stakeholders. So in terms of water, that should be something that I think should be at the forefront of our institutions, right? But something important in terms of the presentation that I gave today that the IBWC does is working towards the early detection of problems, which is also another key into planning and solving or detecting earlier issues that are not larger things or more costly to resolve. But in terms of the academia, I think that we do in this institution, at least, we do a decent job in trying to link those ideas with our students, and sometimes, like Dr. Granados mentioned, we have more resources, but we don't have the reach, or vice versa. So therefore, collaboration.
Thanks, Sarah. One more. I want to make sure we get everybody, give the audience an opportunity here. But for all the panelists, how can cooperative frameworks be strengthened to mitigate the impacts of the water crisis on migrant communities? I suppose, Carmen, it might be good if you could kick us off on this one.
I I I think it's not just about what government do. Right now, we need to talk about the water problem and future impacts in a real and honest way. Young people should not only create new technology or tools, they also need to bring new ideas to how we work together. Social and political factors must be at the center so technical solution can really work and make change happen. It's not just about making more connection. What really matters is understanding what makes us different and finding wise ways to reach solutions and balance for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have a follow-up on that at all? Yeah.
I'm not sure if the question references communities that, informal communities, for example, that grow up around migration. Is that maybe And I guess one thing to say is that there are some efforts, at least that I've heard of, in dealing with sanitation problems and at some of the informal settlements. But the settlements, they come and they go, and so it's not something that engineers or others I don't think can, not an insurmountable problem, but you know, being able to set up something to treat wastewater and toilets and so forth very quickly is something that can work there. And then just one last thing is to remember that on this side of the border, we have communities that were formed by migrants only a few decades or so ago and are still struggling to get piped centralized drinking water, sanitation, and so forth. And little by little, people have been working very, very hard, and now we just have a few communities left without piped water, but there's still a lot to be done with regard to sanitation in those communities.
Great, thanks. Okay, we got time for one more before we open it up. So I think, and I'm big on incentivization, right, of everything. So what incentives do you think could encourage the investment in the water infrastructure that would really be able to benefit both countries? And I think, Alfredo, this gets back a little bit to the follow-up about how do we do transnational or binational funding?
Yeah, the experience has been really interesting in the past 10 years in between the universities. I think the funding is going to be there as long as the pressure on water resources is going to be increasing. And also as societies along the border have been affected. If people get organized and they have done that before, and sometimes it's not the proper way to organize. Like, for example, if we have droughts, I mean, people will look for the way to bring water from any place that we have it. For example, we have a national plan and state plan. We have the national plan, but we also have a state plan for 2040 in Mexico, in Chihuahua specifically. And they have put all this map from where the water is going to be brought into Juarez, which is the main driven economy in the region, with close to 1.6 million people in there, with all these maquiladoras and all this growth in the city, and the aquifers being stressed out from over pumping. But if you extend an imaginary line of 100 kilometers and extend it all the way out, the places that you hit on land use is agriculture. So water in agriculture is being used for Mexico. 70% or more of the water that is entitled to production is for agriculture. So it's mostly surely be affecting the demands on water for the cities from agriculture. So the program that they have right now on the Mexican side is that if you have a well permit with 100,000 cubic meters for a year allotment, and you give 5% to the government back from your own title, which is a concession, is a water permit. Water in the nation is for the nation, but you have a concession, you have a permit to exploit that water as for agriculture, for example. But if you bring 5% of that amount of water for the cities or whatever the government wants, they will put all the technology on your field. And that's a good deal for farmers. However, the challenge is that they should not grow more areas. And that's where the problem comes, because as the farmer feels that it has a little bit more water, they want to expand. And you can see on the imagery that I show you, if you zoom in those areas, they're huge central pivot system abandoned because the water ran out of the process. So it's a deal that you have to make with the farmers. And again, as times move forward and the problem keeps increasing, it's going to be unfortunate, but the only ones that are going to be surviving for this activity in agriculture are the ones that adopt technology. And even those are going to be struggling a little bit to produce food. And then who's going to be bringing food to the table? And are we going to bring it from China or where? Dr. G talked about the pecan is really profitable activity, but it consumes a lot of water. It's 1.8 meters per year per square meter of water. under surface irrigation. But again, it's only an economic decision, and unfortunately, the less people that are poor, they're going to be suffering more because they won't have the money to pay for the water, or desalination water, which is expensive, or any kind of water that has been used for domestic purposes. So it's going to be something that will make people suffer because they won't have the money to pay off.
Did you want to comment on that at all from the governmental side? You know, what hurdles exist to overcome?
But and if it's not enough, I'll defer to the expert here, to the secretary. But I think the hurdles are, well, right now I'm happy for Mexico that we have a president who's pro-science, and right now in the US we're experiencing turmoil in our funding sources, as some of you may know, with really radical cuts in our funding for research, and we're all kind of in limbo at this moment. So I think the changing politics are always a challenge, but for the commission, at least, those positions have never been politicized. They have never depended on an election, which is different for other positions, institutions, and organisms in Mexico, which is what I'm specifically referring to. But I think in terms of the commission, what helps alleviate some of those tensions is the fact that there is mutual accountability. So because of the minutes, as the principal engineer in the earlier talk mentioned, right, or the minutas or actas in Spanish, there is some gentle, friendly pressure on both sides that is always exerting that call to action. So if we're going to agree on something as a bilateral unit, we're going to sign it and you have to get to work. So I think there's a little bit of like a gentle push that sets a precedent where each country is responsible to take action as required/requested. Now, these requests also may come directly from the government. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but these requests can come directly from local or federal authorities where the commission is pulled in to take action on some sanitation problem, for example, right? Or a border marker that, I don't know, moved or something. But in terms of something that is a new idea or a new problem, that can also be addressed for the commission to take action. But for the general processes, the minutes have some sort of, not per se political, but I guess mutual accountability on both ends, if that's very general.
That's great. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all. So let me open it up to the audience. Do we have any questions out there? And I'll go run around like Bob Barker here.
I was actually reading the questions on the chat, and I thought this was a great question from Carmen. I think she's asking, what are you learning and teaching about this problem in your classes? I'm in the EEB department, but I'm actually very curious if the civil engineering side gets more in depth, I guess, with these topics.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we have classes that are in civil engineering, you know, there may be a lot of physics and math based, but I think most of us who teach those water oriented classes introduce the ideas that the natural world is also, or water is part of the natural world or vice versa, and that humans are too, and at least refer to some of these constraints we have to deal with regard to water. And then at the graduate level, we teach a water resources management class that directly takes on some of these things. And then if I could just plug myself one more time, we have a class in hydrodiplomacy that you can take this summer. I think they should all take hydrodiplomacy.
Don't apologize. Oh, absolutely. That works there.
Yeah, in the Mexican side, we have classes in regards to geopolitics and water resources. And we discuss in a class that is called territorial ordinance. So we understand what's going on with geopolitics and resources and economics. So we can understand who is pushing the buttons on the higher levels. So you can understand who is the devil behind the computer, no? Yeah. And we try to be as honest as possible because we then bring it down to the national level and then the state level because they are territorial ordinance based on the national, international and national and the logical. So the discussions in there are really interesting because students get really angry when you tell them what's going on with their future and then how much water is going to be costing them and what actions that they need to take on to reduce that or minimize the impacts. For example, rainwater harvesting classes is given in there and how to calculate how much water to harvest. The interesting presentation that the agriculture lady showed us. So local farming is really important. We show them how to cultivate their own vegetables. It goes as lower as that, as high as the geopolitics on water. And we heard last week that the governor of Texas wants us to pay water and they want us to put a tariff in because we are not going to be able to. I don't know if Manuel and Gilbert are going to be hitting on me later, but I don't know if we're going to be able to accomplish the compromise on water because of the drought. And eventually some deals are going to be made again to help us bring out together some solutions for the border regions. So yeah, there's a lot of classes like that in the Mexican side. You can also come and take that class.
Is that also the summer? You know, I don't want you to do a competition here. No, I think it's great to hear that that young people are so interested in this and digging in. I think that's really key is that knowledge. Was it knowledge is power, right? That was Schoolhouse Rock. Am dating myself? Okay, got another question here.
I know some of you are involved in hydrological modeling, modeling aquifers and surface water and so forth. What has been your experience in how policymakers and water managers who are non-technical respond to the recommendations or the findings of your models?
Everybody's running. Carmen, give you first shot at this one.
Ok, Carmen, entonces va a haber una pregunta dirigida aquí a usted, donde queremos saber de los modelos que se hacen en el ámbito académico de hidrología, del uso subterráneo de agua, de los flujos de agua, ¿cómo repercuten esos modelos hacia las agencias que manejan el agua?
Bueno, muy buena pregunta. Se las voy a responder, pero les voy a hacer otra pregunta. ¿Me ayudas, Luis, para hacerlo más rápido? Todos los modelos que existen, no sé si en Estados Unidos se dé de otra manera, pero todos los modelos que existen, al menos en Latinoamérica y en Europa, los datos que se tienen, que se generan y con que se analiza la información y con que se provee esos modelos, pueden dar alternativas. El problema no es que la alternativa sea efectiva o eficaz, sino que el operario o quien va a implementar ese modelo, ¿sí? No le tiene confianza porque no sabe cómo se obtuvo esos datos. Me voy a detener ahí para que tú lo traduzcas.
All right, so I'm going to shorten it down a little bit, but basically the data that we feed into these models and the data that we generate to use these models, the outcomes from the models help as alternatives. They're not precisely a solution. And one of the main challenges from the agencies is the trust of these models because they don't know how these models work. They don't necessarily know the quality of how this data was gathered. So that kind of, in short, is a challenge, right?
Yeah, gracias, Carmen. You know, I think this gets a little bit. It's a shame. Oh, go ahead.
Sí, yo tengo una pregunta. La voy a hacer en español y ahí la puse en el chat en inglés. A mí me interesa saber, sé que Alex Meyer tiene en el agua, en UTEP, una clase impresionante de hidrodiplomacia, ¿no? Y todos los que manejan en ingeniería civil. Pero a lo que yo me refiero, que este problema del agua es general. ¿Por qué no hay una materia básica en todas las carreras que ayuden y apoyen a entender la gobernanza del agua, los instrumentos y los procesos y cómo somos parte de el problema y de la solución?
Okay, so this might be a question more for you, Dean. Oh boy. So Carmen is asking that no matter what the students are studying, she's asking if there is a class or if they can be a class where they learn about water governments, not just in a technical issue, but also on the social, political, and cultural side. And if not, should we create one?
Wow, I'm not part of the panel here. Not expecting this. So I think this gets back to a little bit to what Rosario was saying earlier, that as scientists, as engineers now, we have to think politically. We have to understand policy. We have to make that crossover for communication and everything. And I think that is a key for all of us in order to build that trust that Rosario was talking about, that Carmen mentioned. So can there be a class? Absolutely. Should there be a class? Yes. How to create the class, I think we have our own internal organizational differences between colleges, but I think it's very possible to put something like that together. And I think this UTEP, personally, I think UTEP would be an ideal place to do that, because we are right on the border, because we face these questions of water every day. So I think I'll lay that down to the civil engineering department and DEERS and our policy group over in the humanities. But I think that's a really good idea.
Yes, continue with her point. My question would be, if we know this is not a problem for one group of people, yeah, we know that we need to spread more the news or transmit the information, but we are not the only ones. So I think there should be a different strategies so we can empower people and make them responsible for the use conservation of water. Because I think one of the issues why CELA is successful is because they share the responsibility, both at the same, because as you said, they sign a document. So the responsibility is not from one, is from both, and both represents two countries, right? What I think it happens is that we forget that this is a interdisciplinary problem, and we need to see who has what resources, what expertise, and then let them include them in the work. It's not just, oh, we are 5 and we have the money and we are going to do it. I don't care. Because it needs to go to the society. And once the society feels responsible of the management of water, the use of water, even as they said, 70% goes to irrigation and people needs to eat, right? But how much are we responsible of how much food is waste that is already consumed water? And we think whatever, or we don't have any idea or something. So then my question is, what should be those new strategies, or how can we address as academics, private industries, government institutions to can work together, each one respecting the expertise, using in an efficient way the resources that everyone has, and so we can go to reach a common goal that is water.
Thank you for that. And I agree with you, all the institutions and everything, but also the communities that I think you were bringing into it, and down to the individual level.
Yeah, I completely agree with Dr. Rios' statement on how can we empower people to be part of the solution. The challenge in here on empowering people is power to the people without scientific information is really risky because they can make really wrong decisions. Now, getting back to the gentleman on the back and question how the mathematical models, how you're going to be explaining a groundwater model to people that only want to consume water. So that gap in between science and society is something that we still need to work. Alex did a nice paper on serious games, how to empower people exchanging roles. And it was a really interesting result that we saw. But the bottom line is nobody wanted to stop pumping. Nobody wanted the business as usual result, but nobody wanted to stop pumping the water. And if we go to the groundwater models, I mean, we know in the Mexican side it's not convenient for Mexico because the groundwater hydraulics is from the US to Mexico. The only thing disturbing that is the pumping well fields that are putting those kind of depressions. So right now we are competing who pumps more. And then it brings out the question of water quality in there and the big expense that we need to bring saline water to treat it. So we need to show people how to reduce their water consumption, show them the information just in the basic level, and expand from there, empowering and giving the resources, put in there some water harvesting, the dry, what's the name of the toilet systems, and compost toilets, and technologies in there like that is important for water. Yeah, and all those things are in there. But yes, a big mathematical model, there have been some examples of that. We have examples of that, those processes of exchanging data in the border. But how can we explain to the people? Because the majority of people they are really concerned on their water resources, but they know how to. We still do. I do it.
Water the sidewalks. Okay, well, we're about out of time. I think that the last point here, bringing technology, community organizations together is really a fitting way to kind of bring this in and bring this home, and particularly in a year after the movie Dune 2 won a couple Academy Awards. I mean, that is society and technology and everything coming together. But I'd like to everybody thank our panelists again. And now thank yourselves as well. You made it through all the sessions today. And Liz has got her hand up, and
that I think fits into this topic pretty well. And that's tonight. There's another talk that's at 7 p.m. at the Centennial Museum, and it's about coming together to make El Paso Juarez region urban water center. So the EPA and the USGS form urban water centers, and it's based upon what the community wants to do. And so we're working to start a center here in El Paso. So if you want to learn more about that, one of our students from Deers, who you mentioned, America Alvarez is one of the speakers, and we also have a hydrologic tech from USGS in Las Cruces speaking tonight at 7 in the Centennial Museum. Thank you.